notes, this meeting will be held electronically as per section 19(1) of the town's procedural bylaw, number 6228-19, as amended due to the COVID-19 situation. Council, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Council Kim, Council Gal, comments, questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Delegations, none. One item, the audited financial statements. We have a presentation to be provided by Giselle Boken, partner, and Emma Roy, senior manager, assurance and accounting, BDO Canada LLP. Ladies, welcome. I'll pass the floor over to you. It's all yours.
Great, thank you very much. So
someone's going to share the screen. Thanks. Go ahead, Emma.
Great. So we'll start by taking you through our final report on the 2020 audit and then proceed into the 2021 planning report. Next slide, please.
Recording in progress.
So this slide just outlines the various sections of our 2020 final report. So we'll cover the status of the audit, our materiality independence, adjusted and unadjusted differences, management representation, have a discussion around fraud, summarize our significant audit findings, and then touch on internal control matters and other certain required communications. Next slide, please. So this current status of the audit is that we're substantially complete at this point. There's just a few items outstanding for us to finalize. That included receipt of the signed management representation letter, some updating outstanding confirmations, updating our subsequent events review through to the financial statement approval date, and then of course approval of the financial statements by council. When we're conducting our audit, we set a preliminary materiality and then update that based on final numbers. We have two materialities, one that we apply to TCAs and then another materiality that we apply to all other sections of the financial statements. Our final materiality for two TCAs was 9.86 million. And our final materiality for all other sections was 2.2 million. And that 2.2 million is based on a percentage of revenues. We identified two significant risk areas, one being the risk of management override of controls. This is a risk that exists in all entities, and the other being around revenue recognition related to assumed lands and developer charges and gas tax revenues. And I'll go into those in more detail in a later slide. Next slide, please. So internal control matters, I'll cover in a bit more detail later. Independence, we are required to maintain independence from the town. And so in the detailed letter, which you would have received, we've confirmed that. So we're not aware of any sort of risks related around independence. Through the course of our audit, there were some adjusted and unadjusted differences. We did find the unadjusted differences to be below our materiality, and there is a detailed listing of those in the letter, which would have been distributed to you. Next slide, please. Management is required to make certain representations to us throughout the audit. They make some verbal or written representations, and we do confirm those representations in our final signed management representation letter. About fraud, so an audit is not designed to detect fraud. However, we are required to maintain an awareness of it throughout the course of our audit. So we made inquiries with management and council in relation to fraud, and I will ask everyone now if they're aware of any actual alleged or suspected fraud, if you could please raise that with us. Okay, next slide, please. So this slide, we go into a little bit more detail around the risks we noted and how we address those. So as I noted, the risk management override of controls is present in all organizations. And then in order to address this risk, we review journal entries, we review accounting estimate for potential biases, and we look for transactions that are outside the normal course of operations. Through the results of our testing, we didn't note any instances of management override of controls. Our next risk is around revenue recognition, specifically related to assumed lands and developer charges and gas tax revenues. In relation to assumed lands, because those are recorded at fair value, some judgment is required in determining the amount of revenue to be recognized. So we obtained supporting documentation in the form of engineering reports, and we noted that the assumed lands were appropriately valued. In relation to developer charges and gas tax revenues, there is a bit of judgment in relation to the timing of recognition of those revenues, as those are deferred and recognized when the associated costs are incurred. In the past, there have been errors noted in this area. There was a restatement in the prior year related to this, and we did note a few control weaknesses in prior years in this area as well. So the results of our testing this year, we noted some small differences that were below materiality. These were extrapolated and taken to our summary of differences, but the amount was, as we noted, well below materiality. Next slide, please. With respect to internal control, we're required to obtain an understanding of the town's internal control environment for the purposes of helping us design and execute our audit. We do not perform an internal control audit. It is just for our understanding of internal control is just to support the execution of our audit. If we did find any significant internal control deficiencies, we would raise those with council. There was nothing worthy of reporting that was noted, though. Next slide, please. And we are required to make certain other communications in relation to items that we note through the course of the audit. This slide just outlines any such items that we would be required to raise, and we did not note anything worth raising, so there's nothing to report in relation to these communications. Next slide, please. I'll now turn it over to Giselle, and she's going to take you through some of the financial statement highlights.
Hey, hi, everybody. Am I on mute? No? Okay, good. Just highlighting, especially for some of the new council members, just where you've been and what your trends are. So you can see the blue line is your revenue. And you might say, well, why was the revenue so high in 2015 and 2016? There was a lot of development charge revenue. If you're growing, and a lot of that revenue goes to, tangible capital assets. So you kind of have two types of revenue, one for your operating fund and one for your TCA fund. So you can see that 15 and 16 were big revenue, and that comes in grants and a whole lot of other income into the town. So you can see, though, the last 3 years, you can see that it's been pretty consistent with the revenue. And the next item down is your expenses. And then you can see what your surplus is from an accounting point of view. That's that little green bar there. Now, in a perfect world, your accounting surplus would be nil because you collect money from the taxpayers and you pay your expenses. But these are accounting surpluses. So a lot of times there's depreciation, and a lot of times the money you're taking from the taxpayers, you're also going to buy capital assets with that money. So you have to have accounting surpluses because you take that money and then either put it in reserves or spend the money on capital assets. The old accounting rules were for municipalities, we just expensed all the capital assets. We can't do that now. So anyways, the good news is it's always good to have an accounting surplus, which you've had in the town for the last 3 years. So we'll just go to the next slide. So then the other thing I was looking at is, what is your surplus and what have been your capital asset addition? So you can see in 2015 and 16, the blue line is your surpluses plus amortization that we've added back. And then the red line is what you've been spending on capital assets. And again, you can see they're pretty consistent, and it depends on the projects. And some of these projects run 4 or 5 years. So you can see what happened in 2020. You know, you had a surplus of 32, but you can see that you spent 42 on capital assets. The year before it was more even. So maybe we can just go to the next slide. So again, what's happening, you can see the surplus is growing at the top. This is your cumulative surplus. So these are all the surpluses that you've had as a town. And then the red line is all the TCAs. So if you look at that bottom 2020, can't really see that last number. If you move it up a little bit. Anyways, see there's 577 in a cumulative surplus. Emma, can you see the
Yeah, 497,000 in the TCAs.
498. Okay. So the difference between your accumulated surplus of 577 and the 490 is really your working capital, your cash sitting on hand. So if you just want to go to the next slide for a second. Oh, I don't. Maybe we didn't have the. There should be a slide for the financial assets. Okay. All right, that's fine. Okay, so if we just go back to, sorry, if we just go back to the slide before. Oh, now I can see it. Okay, so that 487 versus the 577. So if you were thinking of your balance sheet, you have 577 in the surplus and 497 is sitting in your roads, your buildings, your lands, and the other 80 million is sitting in cash for your working capital. So again, if you go back to like 2015, you can see that you had 488 in surplus and 434 in assets. So you only had about 40 million in cash. So you're in a very good cash position is really what I wanted to tell the council. There are a lot of municipalities that are in a negative cash position because they've spent a lot of money on roads and whatnot, and then they have to maybe debenture it in the future. But right now you're in a very good financial cash position. Go to the next slide. So sometimes we look at like, where were you 5 years ago and where are you today as far as revenue? And you can see that 2020 revenue, there's more of the revenue is coming from taxation. It's not like you've increased the taxation, but if you recall in 2015, there was a lot of money, development charges and other revenue for those TCA additions. So most municipalities would be closer to where you are in 2020, about 50% in salaries and contracts and everything else. So it's just that 2015 was odd. So we should see that 2021 is more like this pie chart on the left for where you're getting your revenue. Maybe next slide. And then just looking at expenses, everybody likes to look at expenses. I know I do because I'm an accountant. You can see in 2018, your expenses were running about 89 million. They bumped up to 99 million in 2019. They're back down to about 93 million. And you can see that some of the reduction was probably due to COVID. So again, your expenses went kind of down due to COVID. Less money for leisure and culture and planning and development. But you can see the trend. You're really keeping a lid on the expenses. And maybe the next slide. Yeah, and then this is just a pie chart of where you were spending your money 5 years ago and where you're spending it as a percentage. And you can see again, pretty close to the prior year. Not really a big change in those pie charts on where you're spending your money. And then I think there's one more slide. Yeah, so in general, I just wanted to say the council, the audit went well. We had some adjustments. We worked with your team Everybody was really helpful. And as you know, it's hard to go through audits. We're picky and we ask a lot of questions, and the staff was very responsive and helping us out with any of the issues that we found during the audit. And I just want to thank them all for that. So for 2020, we will still be looking at our significant risks. We'll be looking at those development charges again, helping staff with fixing some of the spreadsheets and everything. Our materiality, we're not assuming that will change much. The fees are fixed based on a tender through the N6. And I guess Emma already asked you if there was any, if you're aware of any fraud, but we're supposed to really ask you before we start the audit, but we're kind of asking you now. So just if council or through you, your worship, has any, if they hear about anything that they're concerned about, that they let us know before we start the 2021 audit. So that's all I have to say. I hope we didn't bore you guys and ladies.
Not at all. Thank you very much, ladies. Council, first, the recommendation is that report number FIN 21-032 be received. 2, that the 2020 audit reports and financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2020 be approved and published on the town's website. And 3, that the 2021 year-end audit plan as proposed by BDO Canada LLP be endorsed. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Kim, Councillor Thompson, comments or questions to the report or to the presentation? Seeing, oh, Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Bakian and Ms. Roy for presenting once again. You know, as I was going through the report and the slides, the one, you know, there was a lot of questions, but I'll just ask you the one that kind of stuck out the most, and that is in terms of internal controls. You know, you just kind of, you know, you review the internal controls to see if it's, I guess you look at, I can't say it's the qualitative, but you review the internal controls, but you don't go to the next stage in terms of expressing an opinion on the effectiveness of the internal controls. When would you advise a municipality to go ahead to the next step to for you to comment on the internal controls?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Giselle. Yes.
Okay, through your worship. So there's a couple things. There's a lot of things a municipality can do as far as reports. There are risk audits that you can get done. So a risk audit would come in and say, is that door locked? Or can someone come in and steal, you know, equipment and things like that? A risk audit would look at, can people hack into your system easily? So what I've been seeing the trend is people going for more the risk audits, the cybersecurity audit to see, to protect their assets. Like an internal control audit, you might be looking for more efficiencies. Most municipalities, from my experience, have pretty good controls because of the number of people that they have. When we go to the private sector, sometimes there's one person doing everything. So I don't know if I would, you know, I haven't really seen that municipalities spending money on a full internal control audit. Just because one of the parts with controls is having 2 people in place, someone reviews it, someone checks it, and that. So, you know, you usually have, and then you have a department head, you set budgets. So there's a lot of controls around that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I have not seen that being done unless possibly someone was worried about a fraud, you know, and then they're looking at signatures. They're looking at, oh, this invoice is for carpeting. Let's make sure it was done at the municipality. We got to go measure the carpet and see that the invoice covers the right amount of carpet that 3 other people's houses didn't get. So those are the type of things, if you were worried about something like that, you would maybe go through with that. Another thing I have been involved in is procurement audits, where we've gone in to make sure that following procurement policies, best practices. So those are kind of where been doing things. Did you want to add anything, Emma?
No, I don't think I had anything to add there. I guess just to clarify sort of the work that we do around internal controls, we're looking to see if there's certain controls that we can rely on for audit testing. So we do some assessments related to the design and implementation of controls, and we did find, there were several controls we can rely on. We are able to rely on controls around purchases, payroll, and water revenues. So the town does have quite a robust internal control environment, as Giselle noted. And we also look at the IT general controls, and our IS audit specialist comes in and look at those, and they found we are able to rely on the system so that there was appropriate access controls in place in relation to the accounting system. So that was the scope of our internal control work for the purpose of the audit.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, that's a great thing that you said, Emma, because when we do the audit, like sometimes we rely on controls and sometimes it's more efficient for us not to rely on controls. It's easier for us to just test the whole amount. So that's why we don't do a full control audit. Thanks, Emma.
Counselor?
Thank you. And I recall 3 or 4 years ago, the presentation was very high level, and the purpose of our audits, at that time was more about the completeness of the financial statements. And, we did inquire about the more qualitative nature of audits, and that was not in scope at the time. And I see, over the last few years that we are kind of slowly getting to the more qualitative aspects of the audit. Would you recommend any other qualitative aspect that we should be adding for future years, or is what you've done this year sufficient for subsequent years as well?
Well,
yeah. I'll go ahead, sir. I wasn't sure which one of you wanted to answer this.
Do you want to start, Emma? You start.
Yeah, sure. So I think there's certain areas qualitatively where there might be opportunities. So Giselle touched on one in relation to the internal controls, and that's in relation to cybersecurity. So, that's a significant risk area. Municipalities are being targeted, and that's ever evolving. So I think that's important to maintain that as an area of focus and staying really, really current with your controls there. There's always opportunities to enhance digitally. So, more efficient, more up-to-date programs, giving you access to better real-time information and making sure that those systems are current and that you're able to pull really quality information out of them. So those are 2 areas, I guess, where there's some opportunities that you might wish to explore.
So thank you very much for another great audit, and see you next year.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to the cybersecurity, is that something that municipalities are starting to do or are doing?
Yes, they are doing a lot of cybersecurity audits, and there's kind of 3 sections. One is they'll run phishing campaigns on the town staff to see if people click on the wrong link, and then they'll give feedback. They might say 50% of the town staff clicked on that link. The other thing they do is a penetration test. Well, they try to hack into your system and tell you where your weaknesses are there. And I can't remember the third because I'm not an IT person, but there's a third thing they do. I think it's just a health checklist on best practices. Yes.
Counselor?
Thank you. And with respect to the procurement audit, I think you said for best practices. I don't believe that's something the town has ever done. You didn't suggest that we do either of these, but again, is it common practice to do that in municipalities?
Yes, but not every year, like maybe every
Right.
5 years, you might pick something that you want to look into. And procurement's very interesting because there's been trade deals signed, and you have to be in accordance with those trade things. So some people are off base, but yeah. I mean, I don't think any municipalities want to spend money on more audits, but to me, I think cybersecurity would be a good place to spend money. I had one of my towns they had a cyber issue, and we were reading the minutes of my presentation the year before, and it said Giselle Bodkin said get a cyber audit. But honest to Pete, you could do the best cybersecurity audit, you still may get hacked. It's just, you know, do you have your backups and everything like that? I think that would be money well spent.
And that was my next question. What kind of money are we looking at?
I think I could be wrong, but I think like 10 to 12,000. I think you can get some good feedback. And just back to what Emma said on digital, you can get like digital consultants to come in and look at how you're storing paper, what you're doing, and we've got the ESG, how environmental you are. So getting people more electronic storage of records. I mean, you think about accounting, but think of all your departments. Being more of a digitalized town in the future. I imagine in the private sector, 80% of private sector is spending money on digital, and I imagine that's going to move into the municipal space. It hasn't yet, but I think it will in the future. Like for instance, Emma and I don't have a phone. All the phones are gone at BDO, just a computer now to talk.
Interesting. Well, Mr. Mayor, I mean, I think that we should put a cybersecurity audit as $10,000 to $12,000. It seems like very little money to spend on something that could be important. So perhaps we can include that in our next budget.
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we did do a cybersecurity testing with a consultant about a year ago, and we have done those phishing exercises and penetration testing. And one of the things that was identified is our passwords were not strong enough, so we changed our password policy to so we have stronger password policies in place, and we have conducted that cybersecurity testing within about a year ago.
Thank you. And
Ms. Wainwright, I was going to say Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel wanted to add something. Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So some of the other things we do through our internal audit program, through our auditor, through the N6. At the end of last year, we did a procurement audit, and we're also going to be going through a risk assessment process with the regional auditor, and they will identify areas for in doing those internal audits. So whereas BDO, they are responsible for doing our financial statements and the audit of our financial statements and financial processes, we do a lot of these other testing through the regional internal audit.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Ladies, thank you very much. I guess we'll see you in a year's time.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
Council, can I get a motion to adjourn? Councilor Gardner, Councilor Thompson, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We are adjourned. I'll see you in 14 minutes.